Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank both of you for being here today. It's great to have you here. And I think it's particularly important for us on this committee and in this body to hear from both of you this week as the House will today consider a resolution regarding ongoing U.S. operations in Iraq and Syria. I imagine you're aware of it. It has been nearly 1 year since the President outlined his plan to counter the threat posed by ISIL, a war he is waging based on authorities that have not been debated by Congress in 13 years. And since the President announced his plan to defeat ISIL, the United States has spent nearly $9 million a day, or nearly $3 billion overall. And at this rate, it will continue. Meanwhile, regional partners are pursuing efforts in Iraq and Syria that may not be in concert with those of the United States. And all of this has happened without a robust debate in Congress about the U.S. strategy, although we're starting to have that here today, the cost, which we have not yet addressed, and the end state in Iraq and the greater region. And I believe it's a debate that is long overdue. But I appreciate very much that you are here today, and General Dempsey, we will miss you. I have always appreciated how forthright, how very thoughtful you have been in our discussions about not just what we're doing in the Middle East, but more broadly across the globe. So I have a question for you that really, I'd ask you to think back a bit, because 10 years ago this fall, you assumed responsibility for a time for training, equipping, and sustaining the Iraqi security forces. But after over a decade of training, as we know, most of the Iraqi army remains a hollow force, and we're still challenged with that. With 450 new American advisors being sent to Iraq, and with your unique perspective in mind, how is today's American train and equip strategy adapting to make sure that we are not again standing up a force that will fold in the face of stiff resistance? Is it just enough that we are going to now seek to recruit Sunnis into it? I think it's much more complicated than that. So what are the lessons learned that give you confidence that these efforts will prove successful as you leave your very unique place in the American military effort?
Thank you, Congresswoman. I have a couple of thoughts. One is in terms of the strategy in general. I think our strategy is it matches the complexity with which we're dealing. If you don't remember anything else I've said today, I think you should remember that the strategy matches the complexity. This is not a simple environment in any sense of the word. And to Ranking Member Smith's point earlier about where it would seem inconceivable to us that the Sunni wouldn't coalesce around the fight against ISIL. The reality is that some of our Sunni partners, both outside Iraq and in, are more worried about the Shia and Iranian hegemony than they are about ISIL. And so that's the environment, first. Second, I mentioned earlier we're trying to build a network. And that network, which will include all the stakeholders I described earlier, will be somewhat fungible from Plan A to Plan B, if necessary. And I think that's an important point to remember as well. So reaching out to the Sunni tribes is a very prudent, and by the way, we're doing it at the request of Prime Minister Abadi. It was his demand signal. Incidentally, there was some discussion that this was a knee-jerk reaction to the fall of Ramadi. We've been planning this for months. And we're looking at other locations as well where we can continue to build this network, which will be applicable to Plan A and in support of Plan A, but also accessible to us if Plan B becomes necessary.
You've mentioned in the past that this is a generational fight, that you don't see this being resolved very quickly. Any words of advice, again, as you are leaving, as to how we adapt over time to the fungible, changing environments? Any thoughts?
Oh, that's the thought, actually. You articulated it, which is that I think increasingly we've got, as I mentioned in our session where we talked about risk, we've got for the first time in my 41 years, we've got states whose capabilities, I don't know about their intent, but I know that they have capabilities that could threaten us, and we have to deal with that. And we have non-state actors who their intent is clear, their capabilities are less clear, and we better find a way forward. And by the way, some of that includes budget certainty, so we can build ourselves a military that can deal with both kind of threats and then be adaptive when we get it wrong. And the key to adapting is actually leader development, and nobody does that better on the planet than we do.
Thank you. I wish you the best of luck.
Mr.